really felt like just everything kind of came crashing down. But at the same time, I had this inner trust within myself in that moment when I got the phone call from my husband telling me that our house was on fire. And as much as I was in shock, I just knew we were going to be okay. Welcome to the Favorite Self podcast. I like to think of it not as your future self or your best self, but your favorite self. My favorite self that just makes me feel the truest version of me. What lights your favorite self on fire? I'm Carly Ottaway, founder, author, storyteller, and a woman who learned that building a successful life means nothing if it doesn't feel like yours. This podcast is for women who are building businesses, raising families, leading movements, and asking themselves, is this it, or is there more available to me? This is your invitation to come back to yourself. Let's dig in. Today, I want to talk to you about this version of yourself that doesn't feel ready, or maybe is waiting to feel ready. I also want to talk about your favorite self and the one who actually takes action and moves before the evidence is there. And then we can talk about how to close that gap. I really believe that your business will always reflect your identity. It's about so much more than your strategy and the effort that you put in and what you're doing. It really is about who you are being. It is your self-belief and self-trust. And that's why today I really want to talk to you about why your business cannot outgrow your self-belief. I know this firsthand after 11 years on this entrepreneurial journey. And I also want to share two really beautiful full circle moments that I've experienced recently that showed me this in real time. So first, let's talk about strategy. Strategy is important. Strategy definitely plays a role. I am someone who built my business in strategy. I'm like formerly this very type A person who really resonated with being the control freak. And I wore that like a badge of honor. I loved having control over everything. This led to a lot of challenges when it came to actually growing and scaling my businesses, but I do think that it was a strength in the early days of my business because I had so much passion for what I was doing. I loved having my hand in every single thing. I loved wearing all of the hats, and I was scrappy. And I think that is important in the early days of your business to understand each of the roles that you play so that when it does come time to delegate or to outsource, you understand what is needed and you're able to lead from that place. At the same time, I also believe that you can have the right offer, you can have even the right messaging and the right systems in place and still plateau, because that is absolutely what happened for me. And there are many variables that go into this, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more as I share my story. But I really believe that your business grows to the edge of what you believe is safe for you. So I came up with this concept called the favorite self. I'm so excited to now be sharing this through the podcast. Really, the meaning behind this is I never really resonated with best self, even higher self and future self. Best self felt so performative. It was so unattainable. And I had to show up perfectly every time. And this put a lot of pressure on me, which I did not need as this recovering perfectionist. And future self just felt like it was always someone that was out of reach. And I felt like it was really taking me away from living in the moment and being in the moment and being who I am now and always feeling still like I was not enough because I was not her yet. And I think there's a time and a place for these different concepts. But for me, favorite self really resonated because she is already within you. She is embodied now. And to me, my favorite self is who I am when I am most present with myself, when I am really living in the moment and in a lot of ways romanticizing what I have here and now and feeling so much immense gratitude for that. And she is also this part of me inspired from my younger self, from my inner child, in terms of how she would create and play and the innocent joy that she had. And I'm so fortunate to be able to look at my kids now and see that younger self reflected back and for them to be a mirror for me in that. And she's also someone I think of in my rebellious teenage years when I really felt like I could do and get away with anything. She's adventurous. She's spontaneous. She is who I am when I feel most alive. And that is what inspired the whole favorite self meaning that I write about in my book, and now that the podcast is built around. And my growth did not come from chasing a future version of me. It came from becoming the version of me that I already trusted. And I believe that that self-trust is so important when it comes to growing a business, especially as you become more established and you experience the roller coaster ride of many different challenges, and you get comfortable in the discomfort of making big risks, of taking chances on yourself, and really believing in what's possible on the other side without having a clear roadmap, without always knowing the how. So I want to share a really cool story with you. If you have been following me for a little while, then you know that a few years ago, my family lost the home that we were renovating in a fire. And it really was this moment of having the rug pulled out from under us and losing everything that we had invested literally all of our savings into. It was already such a stretch to purchase this home and to invest in the renovations. And then just at the tail end, we had a fire. Unfortunately, we were not fully moved in. We had some stuff in storage. Everyone was safe. No one was hurt, which of course was the first priority. But that experience was such a pivotal moment in my life, in my business. At the time, my daughter was 2.5. Our son was 9 months old. I remember he quit breastfeeding cold turkey. It really felt like just everything kind of came crashing down. But at the same time, I had this inner trust within myself in that moment when I got the phone call from my husband telling me that our house was on fire. And as much as I was in shock, I just knew we were going to be okay. And I believe that that's a belief that I had built through my early years of entrepreneurship, through my early years of motherhood, all the character development and resilience that I had built up until that point. And then, of course, this just sent me on a growth trajectory and capacity stretch on a whole other level. And so as I was going through the rebuild experience, I was feeling really lost. There was so much uncertainty, including in the early weeks because of a mishap with our insurance. We actually didn't know if we were covered by insurance for our loss, for, like I said, our life savings, everything we had poured into this home. Fortunately, we were able to advocate for ourselves. We had everything in writing. We were able to fight for what we deserved, but it really was a fight. And I had to learn to advocate and use my voice in a way that I never had before. And I also had to learn to trust in myself, in this path that was laid out before us, and know that there was a reason for it and that it was going to make us better and stronger on the other side, even though I didn't have proof of that at the time. And so what's a full circle moment for me is that shortly after the fire, our realtor was helping us find a rental home, and she shared this podcast with me. She's like, you have to listen to this podcast. It was an episode specifically on hitting your rock bottom. And the podcast was called Expanded. It's by the To Be Magnetic brand, Jessica and Lacey Phillips. And I started listening and I just immediately got hooked. I would listen to every episode drop week after week. And then eventually I ended up joining their membership called The Pathway, and it's a manifestation program. And it really transformed the way that I approached manifestation and also meditation at the time, because it's really rooted in these hypnotic meditations that rewire your subconscious beliefs, and a lot of workshopping around that and journal exercises. And at the time, I remember I would try to meditate and it would always be like the last thing at the end of the day, to my kids, taking care of the business, and I would just fall asleep. And I just felt like I was horrible at meditating. But really, that's what I needed at that time. I was so stuck in survival mode and I stuck with it. And I'm so proud of myself for that, because I built this habit within myself that completely changed everything for me. And so I kept at it. I kept doing the work. And over time, I had more and more capacity, and I was able to prioritize it in different ways and prioritize myself in different ways and build up that muscle. And then I started seeing the changes in myself. There's an inner child workshop that I went through, and so many other amazing workshops, a money workshop. And I really started realizing how I was on this path, this healing path. And a big part of that for me was so rooted in surrender. And I stopped feeling like I had to control every piece. And I really expanded my trust in myself and in something bigger, and my belief in something bigger. And I connected with the universe and with nature and with signs that would reassure me and validate that I was on the right path. I discovered more deeply astrology and human design that really helped me feel clearer and more validated in who I was and the path that I was on. And I felt like I was becoming this new version of myself. And looking back, I can see now how it really wasn't becoming someone new. It was really about returning to who I was at my core, my authentic self, my favorite self, who was with me all along. And I had to do a lot of shedding of old patterns and limiting beliefs that I had adopted along the way, many of which I didn't even consciously realize that I was carrying. So I was in the thick of the inner work. And now that I can look back and see full circle, I can see all of the things that I've manifested along the way. I love their process. It's about so much more than visualizing or just positive thinking. It really is about rewiring your subconscious beliefs. And this is what led to me manifesting my book, actually finally realizing this childhood dream and making it happen, manifesting my publisher for my book, manifesting such a fabulous launch where I felt so loved and supported, and ended up making bestseller status, hitting #1 in motherhood on Amazon, hitting #4 in New Age meditation, seeing my book right next to books that I love and adore so much, like The Untethered Soul. It also led to finally rebuilding our dream home, which is just such a sanctuary for us now, that is my absolute safe space where I feel like I am most myself. And I realized how much I was missing that feeling in my life. It helped me manifest paid travel and vacations with my family, a sauna at my house, which I love to meditate in now, and so much personal and business growth. And really, like, at the end of the day, this newfound peace and joy and confidence and groundedness. It just made me who I am now. And so when I was getting ready to launch my book last summer, I was dreaming big about my launch. I was thinking about my podcast tour, and like my absolute dream podcast to be on was Expanded. And I remember circling back even a few years earlier from that, when I had co-hosted an event called The Collab Party with my friend Christina, who's going to be on the podcast. So you'll be sure to tune into her episode. And as a part of that event, one thing that we asked our guests to do was speak out loud their dream collaboration. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I've got to dream really big here, because I'm setting the example, inspiring them to dream big. And so I said out loud, my dream collaboration was with the To Be Magnetic brand. And at the time, I had so much doubt. Like, even when I said it out loud, it was exciting, but the self-doubt was immediate. Like, oh my God, who am I to be on that podcast? Just not going to happen. But I voiced it and I put it out there, and it really lit a fire and just like started that spark. And I didn't think of it a whole lot after that, to be honest. But then when it came to a couple years later, prepping for my book launch, I sent in my application. And I ended up also at that time, the podcast host Jessica had seen a reel that I had shared about my story about the fire and rebuilding our home. And she had connected with me and reached out about doing a collaborative reel with the brand to share my story. So we did that reel last summer, and it was really well received, and so many people could resonate and relate to my story, especially after the LA fires that were coming, because this podcast is definitely rooted in more of the LA community and in the States. And I thought at the time, like, okay, that was the collaboration. That was probably what it is. It's not actually the podcast. And I kind of just let it go from there. Fast forward, I went through my book launch. It was a huge success, and took December to really like hibernate and enjoy the holidays with my family. And then come January, I was, tuning into my manifestation list again for the year. The podcast came up again, and it was on my list, but I wasn't sure what to do. I was like, do I reapply? What would be the best approach here? And I hadn't given it a whole lot of thought yet. I just had it on my list. And then a couple weeks into January, mid-January, I got an email out of the blue, which actually also happened to land in my inbox shortly after I had established a boundary that I had been putting off for a while and really used my voice and spoke up for myself, which I always love looking back at those moments and what comes through on the other side. So of course, then this email lands in my inbox from the producers of Expanded saying they want to set up a call with me and her, the producer, and Jessica to see if it would be a fit for the podcast. And I just was so excited. I remember dancing around with my kids. It felt so full circle just even getting that email. And then we had the call and it went so well. And they invited me onto the podcast. By the time this episode releases, I believe it will be live or will be coming live. So be sure to go over and check it out. Or maybe you found me through the Expanded podcast. And I just think it's such a cool story because it was such a full circle moment for me, being able to then be in the spot where I'm going on the podcast to share my story from this rock bottom moment that happened when I discovered the podcast, or that inspired, connected to the podcast in the first place. And so I just love stories like this and think it's so important to share them and connect the dots looking back, because this to me is like the power of manifestation in action and watching and seeing how it all unfolds. And really, this was not about strategy. It was about me showing up as my true self, sharing my story, putting myself out there in a way that I hadn't before. You know, the book stretched me in so many ways. I'm going to record a separate episode all about the book journey. But it really was a lesson in being visible and being vulnerable on a whole other level than I ever had before. And so, of course, this manifestation came through on the other side of that. And it really happened not because of something strategic that I was doing, but because I had become the version of myself who believed that I belonged on that podcast. And this reminds me of another story that I want to share as well, another full circle moment. Because when I was in those early days of building my business, my husband and I were talking about growing our family, and I had a lot of uncertainty around that. There was a part of me that didn't know if motherhood was something that for sure was meant for me. I wasn't the kid that just dreamed of having kids one day, but meeting Luke, falling in love with him and building a life with him, I really started seeing it for myself. I knew I wanted to see him be a dad and how he would thrive in that role. And so that's when I really started getting more serious about it. But we took our time after getting married. I married really young. I was only 25, which I did not expect to do as a child coming from divorced parents. I was thinking marriage was far off. But life never goes according to plan. And we got to the point where we were finally ready to grow our family. And it, once again, didn't work out as planned. It was another huge lesson in survival. It took us a while to finally get pregnant. And I still remember in those days wondering, how can I possibly be the mom that I want to be for my kids? The mom that is, pick up and drop off and doing their homework and taking them to all their sports and activities and planning the play dates and packing the cute lunches, maybe not so much that part. And also be the ambitious businesswoman who chased her big dreams for her business. I just couldn't wrap my head around how I could be both. And this was, 8 years ago when I was really having these thoughts. And I didn't have a lot of women in my immediate circle that had a business first and then grew their family and did it in that order. So I didn't have a lot of expanders until I found them and stumbled across them. And you're going to hear from many of them on this podcast. And we've been able to grow up together in entrepreneurship and growing our families, which has been so incredible. But I really come back to that version of me. And the reason I'm sharing that is because this past International Women's Day, I was invited to a speaking event. And I just got this ping or download, heard this voice whispering to me, I need to bring my daughter to this. And I wasn't sure. I reached out to the host to see if that was okay. First of all, it was an event for women. It wasn't for kids. She's 7, but I just knew she had to be there and she was supposed to be there. And fortunately, they were very enthusiastic in their yes. And I was able to bring her along, and on the drive there, we were having a dance party in the car, as we do, especially as I'm getting myself pumped up to go and speak. And I started crying. I just was so emotional because I was remembering that younger version of me who didn't think something like this was possible. And there I was showing my daughter what it's like to go after your dreams and really believe in yourself and what's possible when you do, and that you don't have to take anyone else's blueprint or really take on their own limiting beliefs. You can carve your own path. And she was there. She saw me take the stage. She actually got up there with me at the end, and we were dancing on the stage at the very end to Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys. Like, oh my God. It was such an incredible experience. She was behind my table selling books with me and meeting all these incredible women. And it just made me feel so proud of what I built, the belief that I had within myself, how I stuck with it. And I don't think there was a version of me who was able to picture myself speaking on stages with my daughter there. I just hadn't dreamed big enough to envision that yet. I didn't have the character development to believe that that was even in the cards for me or a possibility for me. And it's wild how much can change in 7 years, 8 years, let alone really in 1 year or two. This version of me on the other side was not one who obsessed over having the perfect balance between motherhood and business. She just followed and showed up as her favorite self and prioritized my values in that so that I could do both and be, I don't even want to say my best, but be my true self in both. And I expanded my identity to be able to hold both. Again, this version of me did not come from choosing between motherhood and business. It came from believing that I had the capacity to hold both. And I want to bring this back to you and maybe a way that you are feeling right now, because if you have been feeling like you're in this place where you're feeling a little bit stuck, or you feel like you've been planting the seeds, but you haven't seen them bloom yet, or you're kind of stuck in an old identity and don't know how to get yourself through and into the next level of growth, that you know you're ready for more, but you just don't know exactly what that looks like or how to get there. That's what this podcast is for. This podcast is for you. And it's to hold you in those moments of doubt and fear of visibility, fear of being seen, fear of putting yourself and your story out there, fear of outgrowing your current life and business, because that is so real too. And this is how you ultimately are unconsciously capping your growth. And we're going to dive into how to rewrite that story that is hiding beneath the layers and become the conscious author of your life and your business. And in that pursuit, watch as your self-belief expands, your self-trust expands, your capacity expands, and then the results and the manifestations follow, because you truly become a magnet to all those dream opportunities and relationships and connections that you are here to pursue. So I really believe in my work, a big part of my core values is that your business grows when your self-belief grows. Your messaging improves when you really start trusting your voice. Your visibility increases when you finally feel safe to be seen. And your sales grow ultimately when you truly believe that you are the right choice. You are the one who can do the work and get them the results that they're looking for. Because again, your strategy doesn't create your results. Your identity determines how far your strategy can go. So once again, I want you to think and just turn inwards and ask yourself, where am I waiting to feel ready? What version of myself am I postponing? There's a version of me that still does not feel ready to launch this podcast into the world, but I am doing it anyway. And I am trusting that it is going to lead to something amazing that I don't even know yet. And I can't even envision for myself yet. You don't need to know the how. You don't need to see the path clearly or see the full flight of stairs. You only need to see the next step. And you definitely don't need to become someone else or follow someone else's blueprint. You can do it your own way and carve your own path. The key is that you need to know who your favorite self is and choose to become her now. And this is how you start showing up before you feel fully confident, speaking like someone who trusts themselves and is confident in their message and makes decisions from a place of expansion rather than fear or scarcity. You don't build self-belief after you've achieved the results. You achieve the results from the self-belief. And your business is a mirror. And I'm going to talk about this in another episode as well. But your life, your business is actually mirroring back what you believe about yourself and about what you're capable of. And it also mirrors back where you feel triggered, where you feel blocked, where you feel tested. It mirrors back the areas that you still need to work on, that you need to grow through and heal through in order to expand into that next level. This is the work. This is the most important work, not just building the business, but becoming the version of you who can hold it. And I am so excited that we get to be on this journey together and that you are here tuning in. I hope you feel pulled to come back week after week. We're going to have some fabulous guests and some more stretchy solo episodes diving into this work. And I can't wait to share it all with you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the Favorite Self podcast. If this episode stirred something in you, there's a reason for it. You could take a moment to share with a friend, someone who's also building something brave. That would mean so much to me. Better yet, leave a review. It helps this message reach even more women who are ready to lead differently. And before you go, remember this. Your favorite self is already within you, waiting to be heard. See you next time.